So good afternoon, everyone, again from me. Yeah, there's no coffee break now, but we come to the end of the day after three what I consider to be magnificent panels on the substance of international criminal law and the history and the development over the last 80 years. Herbert, you're supposed to be sitting over there.
I like it too much.
Thanks, yeah. He wants to be close to me, I can see that. Well, we're now at the end of this second day of our Nuremberg Forum 2025. We want to come back to this very room in which we find ourselves in and discuss a little the importance that it has today for the culture of remembrance and for the development of international criminal law. The Nuremberg Principles Academy, together with the Palace of Justice and the Memoriam, so to speak, a little bit the custodians of Courtroom 600, we decide what takes place in this room and what doesn't. So it's very important for us to discuss the relevance and the importance of this room. And the room we are in is obviously a very special room. It might well be the most famous courtroom worldwide. There are pictures of this room in almost every history book. Of course, it stands for the Nuremberg trial, the trial against the German major war criminals, against Göring et al., the trial that ended and delegitimized National Socialism in Germany, the trial that was to establish the crime of aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and crimes against humanity under international law. This room very much reminds us of the trial as an historic event. It also reminds us on the crimes which were prosecuted here. But how does this actually work? Why is it important to have this room? To preserve it as a place to visit, to meet, to discuss on the issue of accountability for international crimes. Now with me in this remaining half hours, there are two very distinct persons who both have their specific history with this room. First of all, Rebecca Weiss. Rebecca Weiss studied sociology and social anthropology, and you can see all the details of her CV in the brochure. And she has for several years now been working with the Memoriam Nuremberg trials and is as such sort of responsible also for the media installation she has been working on very extensively, and also the extension of the Memoriam, which is the exhibition which is planned. And then, of course, on the very left side from me is Professor Herbert Regenbogin. He has been a professor for many, many years in several countries, Turkey, Germany, the United States of America. At the moment, he is Collegiate Fellow of Law at the Catholic University of America's Institute for Public Policy in Washington, D.C. So let's go right into the questions. And I would like to pose my first question to Rebecca. So you commit your professional life to this courtroom. You are a member of the Memoriam staff of the city of Nuremberg. So what does this room mean to you? What does it mean for you to be working here?
Thank you so much for your question, and already starting with such a difficult one. Thank you for having me this afternoon. It's really an honor to speak in front of so many people who obviously Courtroom 600 means a lot to as well. And I obviously could talk about what this room means to me for a very long time. I promise I won't. I tried to narrow myself down to two aspects of this place and of this history. Of course, as we've heard in the last few days, the very center of this room, the very significance is the legacy and the history of the Nuremberg trials. But what I find very interesting about this place is that it has a history before the trials and after the trials. And here in this courtroom, other trials were held that are very much a mirror of German and also international history, which are often forgotten. And I would like to share a bit of information with you on these aspects because I think we don't have the opportunity to talk about these things that often. And the first period I would like to look at is that of the Weimar Republic, the democracy that preceded the Nazi regime. And in 1925, there was a very significant trial held in this very room. It's called the Luppe-Streicher trial. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Hermann Luppe was the Lord Mayor of Nuremberg during the Weimar Republic, and he obviously, as you all know, had to face serious defamations, attacks on him from the early National Socialist Party here in Nuremberg, and he tried actually to use the rule of law to oppose them and put them here in this courtroom on trial. He won the trial, but nonetheless, this trial was then significantly used against him in early Nazi propaganda. There is another trial I would like to talk to you about very, very briefly. Since yesterday, we heard so much about the anniversary, the 90th anniversary of the proclamation of the Nuremberg race laws. Also in this courtroom, there was in 1935 a very significant trial against Leo Katzenberger. He was the head of the Jewish community in Nuremberg during that time, and he was sentenced to death in this courtroom on the basis of the Nuremberg race laws. And again, in connection to the Nuremberg trials, this case was then taken up again in the justice trial and of the follow-up trials here in Nuremberg. And I would like to read a short quote to you because I cannot paraphrase it. It's so very well done in the verdict. And it says, "The evidence establishes beyond a reasonable doubt that Katzenberger was condemned and executed because he was a Jew. His execution was in conformity with the policy of the Nazi state of persecution, torture, and extermination of these races." Rothaugs, he was the presiding judge in Leo Katzenberger's trial, who was then on trial in the follow-up trial. Rothaugs' acts were more terrible in that those who might have hoped for a last refuge in the institutions of justice found in these institutions turned against them and are part of the program of terror and oppression. So you can see also, during the Nazi regime, this courtroom played a very significant role in terms of the race laws, in terms of the special courts that were held here. And also after the Nuremberg trials, I would like to extend the perspective a bit further. The issue of right-wing extremism and right-wing terrorism is something that Germany is dealing with until today. And also in this very courtroom, there was in 1984 to 1986 a trial against Karl-Heinz Hoffmann. He was the head of a local far-right paramilitary sports group who was also tried here in this place. So you can see there's so many perspectives, so many layers of history that are connected to this place that make it very, very special, in addition to this legacy of the Nuremberg trials. And the second thing why I think this courtroom is very significant is that the culture of remembrance that developed here is very special. Maybe you heard of it before. Actually, this place had visitors coming here before it was ever a museum. And there were people standing in front of the door of the higher regional court next door and asked to see Courtroom 600. And the judiciary had a very difficult relationship with this heritage because they rebuilt this courtroom and basically erased all the traces of the Nuremberg trials, but still, from 1960 to 1969, over 2,000 people were shown this courtroom by the judiciary, who obviously had a different job actually to do and was not in charge of historical political education of people interested in the history of the Nuremberg trials. And I think this development of the culture of remembrance here on this very side, and this push by people from all over the world wanting to see this place, and also civil society here, is very significant and makes it very special for me to work here. And what also always supported this is the anniversaries, and the anniversaries really did play a crucial role in the development, and I think my co-panelist has quite a lot to say about that.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. Yeah. Indeed, as you've mentioned, that there were visitors outside the door wanting to get in and visit the room. I remember when in 2010, it's only 15 years ago, that the memoriam was actually opened. The then Lord Mayor, Dr. Ulrich Mali, said in his opening speech, usually you contemplate on an idea to establish a museum, to construct it, and you open the doors, and then you try to find people to come and visit. Here, it was the other way around. You had already the visitors standing outside, and you need to desperately develop a museum to make this room more accessible. Right, then, Herbert, we have a little bit of a personal history here. I first met you in 2003 when you showed up in Nuremberg on a mission. you were on a mission to organize an international conference commemorating the 60th anniversary of the beginning of the trial in 2005. So the importance of the anniversaries shows here. You wanted to partner up with both the Bavarian judiciary and the local University of Erlangen-Nuremberg to prepare such a major event together with the law school that you represented, the Truro Law School, at that time. There was no museum yet. The room was an ordinary courtroom for everyday crimes in the region. I, being a young assistant professor at the university at that time, was tasked to represent the university in the organization team by the dean of the law school. Apparently, I was the only one in the faculty who knew how to spell international criminal law properly. We had great meetings with the president of the court. I have very fond memories of these 2 years of preparation. And we had what turned out to be the first major conference on the Nuremberg trial in this courtroom. And some of you were there. I remember John and I think Bill, you were also here in 2005. So, Herbert, what was your impression when you first came here and saw this room?
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. But I always thought it was 2004.
Oh, you showed up in 2003.
I did. Yeah. I'm getting old. Anyway.
Preparation took much longer than that.
I see. I wonder. It's a pleasure to be here again. And as I always say, you can't forget what you miss. And I have missed a lot. But my work in coming here is not something that is a story about visiting, but rather performing. My entire career has been dedicated by upholding this world order based on the Nuremberg principles. And it's a serious work that stretches over decades, beyond this continent, beyond the United States, into the world. And wherever I go, the ideas that present themselves must be demonstrated, not only in the classroom, but in civil society. And my biggest problem is the communication. And so venturing on was, at that time, the dean, Larry Rafel of Truro Law School, Michael Basler, who has been here many times, as well as with Professor Christoph Safferling, and myself and a group of dedicated people. We worked diligently to create something for 300 Orthodox Jewish people, never before, to make that bridge between what happened in World War II, the Holocaust, the Nuremberg judgments, and 2005. Those Jewish customers paid to come here, not just for the one day, for 3 days. 3 days of the most expensive and exorbitant experience of having kosher food, of looking at the rallies, talking about things people do not talk about. And this was also the time of the Iraq War. This was about crime by America and others. This was about reflection. And this was what was my purpose of coming here to discuss how we can organize this in a very informal but very excellent environment to cultivate this bridge between Germans and American Jews. And that bridge is what brought me here. And this is why Courtroom 600 is so important. It is to be that bridge between all Germans, all Europeans, and the world. But the point is that in this attempt to come to Courtroom 600, my work still continues and will continue. And this is the purpose of my coming.
Thank you so much, Herbert. Rebecca, now the Memoriam Nuremberg trials count some 150,000 visitors a year. So could you tell us a little bit about who are these visitors and what do you think they are looking for when they visit the room?
We're actually very proud because the Memoriam Nuremberg Trials has definitely the steepest climb in visitors numbers in all of our municipal museums here in Nuremberg, and this probably has to do with the topic as well and the significance of this courtroom. And you're right, it were almost 160,000 visitors last year. This year, until the end of September, already 125,000 people were here. So let's see what the last 3 months of the year are going to bring. But we are hopeful that we can have the same number of people visiting. And actually, most of our visitors come from abroad. Only 4% of our visitors are German speakers, 76% of our visitors speak another language, and 35% of these people from abroad speak English. And by far the largest group of visitors coming to us next to Germany is the US. So most of our visitors come from the United States, and when we think about what do they want to see here, why do they come to us, we actually try to evaluate that constantly. We have questionnaires, we do visitor studies, and of course this group consists of many different part groups who all have different needs. It's students, tourists, people who are on cruise ships, military, police, all kinds of different groups who have different interests in coming here. And this is also what is one of the most important points in our work here on site when it comes to historical political education, that we always look at what is the interest of the people coming and how can we talk about the things that they want to see. And of course, one of the big things is seeing Courtroom 600. And we always had the most complaints when it was not opened. Like today, but still people can look inside here. So people want to see this place, they want to see the real authentic side. But we can also report from our questionnaires that especially young people are very interested in the connection of the Nuremberg trials and the connection to international criminal law, and especially also the development of human rights. So this connection is very important for us and also something that we talk about quite a lot.
Thank you, Rebecca. I don't know, some of you had a chance to go up to the museum in the attic and have a look, and you always experience there's a huge crowd every day, every minute. And indeed, it's always difficult sort of to, block the room with a conference like that or the moot court, and we always try to sort of compromise with the many visitors that obviously want to feel this aura in this room. Now, Herbert, we have heard from Rebecca that the biggest group from abroad are visitors from the United States. So you've already elaborated a little bit about the importance for the Jewish community. But is there a special American story or relationship with this room?
I like you asking that question because it got something very special. The book. The book that was created after this conference. And this book is structured on the perspectives of all the Allied powers, including Germany, at the time of 45 and 46. And it goes on. It has people like Judge Crowell, Gabriel Bach from the Israeli Supreme Court. It has professors like John Barrett and other colleagues. But most important of all, it was about how America is a part of this entire idea. For it was them, with America, who really created the idea of a permanent court. And that is American history. It is America who brought the values, the ideas and concept of natural law, not the laws of a science created back in the 19th century. It was to instill the values that was lost in those judgments under Carl Schmitt and in this court of 35. It was time that the American, which was a hegemon, a superpower, began to talk about idealism, a vision, a concept. And this is more important than anything else. This is exactly what we are all entertaining, the vision, the hope. This is what Courtroom 600 is about. And it is more than that. It's more about American history, it's about us. How do we do in our daily lives what we do to strengthen these values and visions? And that's a question mark. Because like at the beginning of this entire conference, are we going to have no more rule of law? Is international criminal law done? Because other systems are really in conflict with the values of what America pertains to endorse. And today, even today, that country is now on the verge of Nazism. That's right, this is 33, not 45, 33. And look at what's happening in the world. Fascism, populism, extreme right. And this is what this courtroom should balance. It should be a symbol that we need to return to the very principles. And those are American history and American values.
Thank you. Personally, I always find it impressive whenever I visit the United States and you happen to sort of meet a nice border guard, you know, and he asks you, what are you about to do? And in the United States, you say, well, I'm going to a conference on the Nuremberg trial. And then he would say something like, oh, my grandfather was, and then comes some sort of personal story. But international criminal law was applied here in this room for the first time. Now, 2 years ago, the Free State of Bavaria applied for the Palace of Justice to be added to the list of UNESCO World Heritage. Well, culture ministers in Germany decided against putting the building on the national tentative list. The room has undergone too many changes, they stated, and that it does not look the same as it did in 1945. Authenticity is missing. Rebecca, now, this courtroom has almost 110 years of history. Resemblances of the Nuremberg trials have been removed, as you've already said, when the courtroom was given back to the Bavarian judiciary in 1960. Now, and you see one of the most major changes, obviously, is the big cross just above us. So, Rebecca, is this a problem, the cross and the re-establishment of this room for its role as a place of remembrance?
Well, we talked about our visitors before, and of course, people come here to see the authentic place, the historic site of the Nuremberg trials, and we take this very seriously. Right above your heads, when you look up there, you can see this huge construction, and this is actually part of a media installation that runs here every single day when the museum is open, and this is one aspect of taking this wish seriously, because it basically reconstructs Courtroom 600 digitally, virtually, as it was during the time of the Nuremberg trials. For me, as somebody who works in a museum, actually it's not a problem at all that this place doesn't look the same as it did back then. We talked about layers of history before, and the construction history of Courtroom 600 is also connected to different layers of histories. When it was first opened in 1916, there was a courtroom built for the needs of the court that was here, the jury courts that were first established here. When the Allied came here in 1945, they adjusted the courtroom to their needs. They enlarged it to have more space for visitors, for the press especially. They also added windows, additional ones, for cameras so they could film the trials. Back then, by the way, during the Nuremberg trials, there was nothing there on this prominent spot right above my head, because there was very close by a window for the camera position there. And in the 1960s, this courtroom was again rebuilt, basically reconstructed back into the version of 1916 by the Bavarian judiciary. And of course, this has something to do with how a culture of remembrance is treated in Germany after the war, in the post-war period. Today, we are very proud of our culture of remembrance here in Germany. We have many institutions, many museums remembering the past in different perspectives and facets. But back then, that wasn't the case. And I told you before that the judiciary showed people this courtroom and let them in here, but also at the same time, we have a document in our collection, which I like very much. It's a letter from June 1962, when an Italian film company asked the Higher Regional Court if they could come here to film the historic site of the Nuremberg trials, and basically the answer was, there's nothing to see here anymore. It's not suitable to film anything about the Nuremberg trials. And I think this is not true, and all these different layers of history basically give us today a chance to come into dialogue with our visitors and talk about what changed, what did they expect, and what do they make of this place, and reflect about the development of a culture of remembrance. And for this, the Courtroom 600 is also a very good and very prominent example to show this in a very practical manner.
Well, thank you. To conclude with a final question now, Herbert. I mean, you've already said a little bit about that, but maybe you could again summarize, what importance does this courtroom have? What should it serve in the future?
The natural answer would be that it serves as a remembrance. But a remembrance of what? A picture of men sitting there, defendants, or rather people who committed crimes beyond our imagination. And they were rational. And that's the irrationality of that rationalization. We have to ask ourselves, are we capable of doing the same? Why? Why would we not be? Why would not a people be able to do the same as the people did? And people do. We still have genocide. And yet we have an hope and an idea, and the Courtroom 600 serves that idea. So what is the importance? What should it serve? It should serve to remind that we can do better, and we have to. If we don't, we'll fail. And remember what Robert Jackson said, the wrongs we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated and devastating that civilization cannot tolerate this being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated. And yet they're being repeated. So what are we doing? How can we do this? Well, in Ukraine, again, the idea of this Courtroom 600 plays an important role because now they're seeking under other venues. We have another court, a court that deals with aggression, the war of aggression. And this is not just a court, this is the beginning of something very, very important because we're going to expand it into a new realm of where US foreign policy will become accountable to making sure we stop an end to this type of aggression. That sounds futuristic, but there is a recap, a reaction of what's going on in America right now. And there's fear. And as I speak about this, I'm going to take the opportunity of also talking about Ukraine, because this is a book that was co-authored with the help of Professor Safferling and my past colleague, Marshall Brager, who passed away some 7 weeks ago, and I spent 2 years editing after this conference in 2023. And yet all of these conferences which we've organized have always been on the remembrance of Courtroom 600. And it is not somewhere out there, it is in America. The leading deans of law schools, jurists, are really supportive. They're committed to international criminal law, including the International Court of Justice. And 2 years ago, we were on the verge of really thinking we could become signatories, eventually. Now we live in the dark ages. But it is that hope, that candle of light, that remembrance of this court that symbolizes what can be done and must be done. And for this, the court serves the ultimate goal, the justice. And I mean real justice for the people. Not talking about just what kind of justice, it's what people need, want, and to know that they can get the justice if the people believe in what the court does. And it's now the question, can the court deliver? Can the court communicate? Just not say, well, I tried. No, it doesn't work anymore. This is a professional world, and you have only one chance to do it. Do it right or go home. And that's where we are. We either do it right now, stop what is going on in the world, and remember our Nuremberg principles, who we are, the values we live and talk about every day, and this courtroom 600 will remind us, and we will reserve for every day and day in, not for 150,000, but for 1 million, and more people to come here and see it and want to learn, and I mean really learn. So to answer your question, this is the reason that Courtroom 600 has a purpose to serve, is to serve real justice.
Thank you, Herbert. Thank you, Rebecca, for this intervention, meant to be a sort of a short focus on this courtroom and its role and its symbolism for international criminal law and the culture of remembrance. So this would end our second day. Thank you so much. We say goodbye to everybody who's online. And I say goodbye to all of you here in the room. I wish you a relaxing evening with probably many more thoughts and discussions amongst yourself. It's been a very intensive day, so we need this time to reflect further and sort of let it all get down to us, what we've been hearing and discussing. And we will see you then tomorrow here at 10:30. With our next panel on reinforcing frameworks and cooperation for our final day here in this historic courtroom. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.